Hello, and my name's Terri O'Sullivan, and today we are talking with Marie de Elephant, and for Faith to Faithless. Normally at Faith to Faithless, we would be running throughout the year social events based at universities or different societies around the country, talking with different people who have left high control religious groups and hearing about their exit stories. And obviously in this age of COVID, can't do that right now, but Marie has very kindly offered to talk to us about her story. So thank you very much, Marie, for this. That's really kind of you. And these kind of stories are really helpful, not just for people who are exiting now, but also for people that exited a long time ago. So I really want to thank you for offering your voice, because we get contacted all the time by people saying, hey, I watched this video of you guys, people talking, and that's really helped me a huge amount. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's my honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so do you want to introduce yourself and say what religious organization you were raised in, what that was like, and then build that up to your exit story? Is that okay?
Sure, totally. So I was born in Minnesota, which is a Midwest state in the U.S. I was raised in an evangelical white Christian family, very much insulated religiously, very much insulated racially. Went to private schools, went to church 2 to 3 times a week, got baptized twice, just to make sure.
Why would they baptize you twice?
Well, because when I was born, they were more affiliated with Lutheranism, which is a form of Christianity where you baptize your baby. Whereas later on, they kind of transitioned to Baptist, and that's part of their doctrine is that you should be able to be of sound mind and body, like before you get baptized. And so at 13, I was like, I want to choose to be baptized, and so I was baptized twice.
That's interesting. So
yeah.
You chose at 13 as this is like a really adult decision to make, and you're like so grown up at the age of 13.
Yeah, I've got a video of it and everything. It's odd. Yeah, and so I was raised in it, and I mean, I can remember very early on, like before the age of 9, maybe 8 or younger, I think I had misunderstood some kind of indoctrination they were giving me, and I thought that if I didn't ask for forgiveness for every single sin from the day and from my entire life, then if I died during the night, I would go to hell. Like I thought it was this black and white kind of thing, which I believe some religions actually do believe that, but it was a miscommunication. But it just goes to speak to what were they saying that you could misinterpret it so much. So I remember having panic even as young as 8 or younger about hell, and about knowing that I was sinful, and knowing that the F word was sinful, and if I even thought about it, it was a sin. And so it would turn into this like cyclical spiral, like of thinking of the pink elephant and then apologizing for the pink elephant. And it was just crazy making. It was crazy making, and it started that early.
Was that kind of level of control on your thoughts, was that typical within the religion, or was that your family, or was that something that happened to you? Or do you think that most people in that religion that you raised in will have experienced very similar thing, where you're just fearful of even your own thoughts?
That's a fair question, and I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out the answer to that, to be honest, because I don't think that it came directly from my parents. I think a lot of it did come from the church that I attended, but then at the same time, people I've talked to who went to the same church as I did, now years later, we're talking, and like a good amount of them did not internalize those messages the same extreme way that I did. And so it's a bit of a combination of my own genetics of being prone to maybe obsessive behaviors or like extreme interpretations of things. Plus, you know, just what they were providing us, the doctrine that they were providing with us was just toxic to kind of begin with, and it's hard to make anything good out of it. So yeah, I would say it's a mix of things, and that's made it very difficult to just be angry at a certain thing. As I look back, because it's complicated, and I try to embrace that it's complicated, and I try to embrace myself for who I was back then. So I drank the Kool-Aid. I loved it. It was delicious. It gave me a sense of organization and control when personally I'm terrified of not having control. And so, like, moreover, you know, when you're coming of age, you know, you're coming into puberty and you're like attracted to all these people, and God tells you that you can't lust after people, you can't masturbate, you can't have sex before you get married, you can't be in love with anyone that is not of your opposite gender. It was almost a relief to be told that I couldn't do anything about it, because I was so scared of like flirting or talking to anyone. And I thought like that I had nothing to offer, and that I was this annoying, weird, energetic girl, and not cute and coy and coquettish like the other girls in my class. And so I liked the purity culture messages that I was getting. Subconsciously, I liked it. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
I mean, it gave me an excuse.
It's clear guidance.
Well, yeah, and I didn't have to deal with boys. I didn't have to talk to them. I didn't have to get to know myself at all. I just outsourced it to my pimp Jesus to like hook me up, you know. And so I didn't have to. I just didn't have to deal with it. It still wasn't pleasant, but it was an out. So I signed 2 pieces of paper at 2 different times saying that I pledged my virginity to my future husband, because of course I was going to marry a man, because of course. And
what age would you have been then when you had to sign
2 different ages. It would have probably been like 16 and 17, like 2 different times in high school, I think. At 2
and
different
is this
events.
like a pressure to sign this, or is it like a status thing?
I mean, it's nothing you really like flaunt around after the fact. It's very much pressure in the scenario, because these church situations, especially with youth, are very sensational. There's a lot of like, I mean, if you've seen the documentary Jesus Camp, there's just a lot of pressure on young minds to behave certain ways within these social settings where you are already prone to really want your peers to approve of you, or to want your leaders to approve of you. And so it's just entirely unfair for people to put pressure on you like that. And so, but that happened. I mean, that happened to me, and so I signed it, and I didn't really get any clout afterwards, but it made me feel like I belonged, and like that I was playing the game right, and that I was doing it right.
Because there's so much reward in those kind of things. You make some sort of commitment, even though you're a child. So that's signing this document, signing away your virginity, bizarre thing. But I should imagine your parents, church leaders, and other parents and other kids will go, "Well done, yeah." Was that sort of stuff happening? Or?
I mean,
or was it?
No, it wasn't. It just kind of happened in the moment, and you were just kind of expected to do it, and then no one really talked about it afterwards.
Okay, that's interesting.
It's really strange.
It's strange.
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't get any like pats on the back from my parents, and that's where I'm trying to separate like my parents from religion, because I don't think my parents were as extreme as I ended up becoming.
Okay.
So they never really patted me on the back for any of my involvement in purity culture, but they also didn't talk it down. Like, they didn't discourage me from it either. And I don't know if it would have been successful anyway, because I'm already kind of a headstrong person. So maybe they just knew better. But yeah, they let me do it. They didn't discourage it. And I mean, I even wanted them to like give me rules. Like I remember one time telling them like, hey, can we have a discussion about what age I can be allowed to date? And this is someone like who has never talked to a boy in her life, like asking her
Right.
parents for like guidelines about dating. Because I wanted, I don't know, I wanted that. And they were like, you know what? Whenever it becomes an option, let's talk about it then. I was like, oh man, you guys, like, you're really that discouraged? You really just don't think I'm going to ever date? So
That's
we never,
interesting. Yeah, that's
yeah, like I think I
interesting.
was looking for rules. I was looking for
Mhm.
black and white. I was looking for guidance. And I see that in myself still. I'm always looking for structure, yet fighting structure. It's this constant tension inside of me, and it's difficult to manage. Even without religion, that tendency is still there. So yeah, so I was very much into Christianity, very much into purity culture, very much into church, very much into my Bible, went to Bible camp every summer, worked at Bible camp, even traveled to a city north of me, about 3 hours north of me for the entire summer to do missions work there, just me, not like any kind of youth group thing. I was like, I'll go there. So I went there and did missions, trying to convert people, helping at the
Wow.
church, that kind of a thing, living away from home at 17. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, so like I
So they
was,
let women do that? They let women do that kind of stuff without a husband and in that
yeah,
group? Okay.
yeah. In the particular strain I came from, like there is misogyny, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean there's an extent to it, right? And so that was never a thing that I felt like I couldn't do. I had never seen any preachers that were women, but I don't know that I ever felt a sense that that wasn't something that I could do.
Mm.
Um, so so I just absorbed all of this information about being terrible, sinful, all the doctrine without question. Like, yep, of course Jesus came down to die for our sins. Of course we ate an apple. Of course that's sinful. Of course sex is sinful. Of course this is a temporary earth and we're all going to go to heaven. Of course there's eternity. Of course the world is only 6,000 years old. And I gobbled it all up. And anytime I started having doubts, which was about the age of 13, which is kind of when you start thinking critically,
Yeah.
or at least begin to toy with it,
Yeah.
that's when I started kind of wondering, like, I don't think this doesn't entirely check out. This doesn't make a ton of sense, like emotionally and intellectually. But the
Right.
problem was that the doctrine that I was given was that my heart is a wicked, sinful thing, and that wisdom, human wisdom, is foolery in front of God. And so I was trained to not trust my own intellect, and I was
Right.
trained to not trust my intuition, and I
Mhm.
was trained to even be suspicious of them, and at times even call them the devil. Like any
Right.
kind of doubt that I had, I was told like that's just the devil trying to get to you. And so there was no way to honestly engage with doubt because it was already defined as the devil.
Yeah.
Um, or just that you are just a bad person and that's why that this is happening, and God is always right and you are always wrong. And so even though I started doubting at the age of 13, I only got more and more extreme.
Right. So did you start to see your doubts as evidence for the things that they were teaching? Like that this is like the devil trying to get into your mind. So you were like, oh yeah, yeah, now I see what they're saying is true, or
I don't know that I saw it as evidence in so much
mm,
as it was just like this is the war. Like there was a lot of war language, a lot of battle language. It's a very
oh right.
violent, rhetorically violent religion, at least the one that I grew up in. So I saw it as a battle, and that there was a spiritual warfare happening over my soul, and that
Right.
this is something to be expected for the rest of my life because the devil wanted me but God loves me, and so there's just going to be this game my entire life. So that was just part of the narrative. And I just thought, this is my fault, this is my fault. So I need to get more involved, and I need to read more, get closer to God, so I'm studying the Bible, I'm going on missions trips, I'm getting involved in church, I'm starting Bible study groups, and I graduated from high school, and I was like, you know what? I don't know. I don't understand the point of life. I don't understand why all my peers are going to college, because that is so self-indulgent. Because if God is really real, and if there's a heaven and a hell, and if there are souls that go to one place and not the other, there is absolutely no point to life other than to get more souls to go to heaven. And so I didn't understand why my peers went to college. I was like, this is literally the meaning of life, to save souls. So even at that point, I was a humanist. If there is a
Right.
heaven and a
I
hell,
see.
so like I see that in her, in the old me. And
Uh-huh.
so I signed up for missions work, full-time missions work in Mexico. And
Mhm.
so I moved there at the age of 18, and I was there for several years.
And that was on your own. You went there on your own.
Well, no, I mean, I joined a group down there. So it's a
Right.
school that you do a school for 3 months, and then 3 months you do outreach. So you travel somewhere and you do dramas in the streets and preach to people and try to convert them. And
Right.
so I did that for several years. And some of those years I was still struggling with my faith. And, several of those months I was atheist, but they wouldn't
Right.
send me home
Okay.
because I was too great of an asset, because I was bilingual. I think it was mostly the bilingual part that they were like, no, it's okay. You'll find God here. Just keep translating.
Oh, wow. So did you tell them that you no longer believed in God? You did.
I did.
And what was the reaction like to that?
They were like, well, if you're going to find God, it's going to be here. So don't
Uh-huh.
go home. And I was like, okay, because I guess, I'm already here. So I stayed, and eventually, this is a very spiritual abusive situation. What they did down there, it's much, much worse than anything I had experienced back in the U.S. And not
Right.
that it's Mexico contingent; it's about the extreme
Mm-hmm.
manifestation of that particular kind of religion. It's very charismatic type of thing. So I was very much spiritually abused during that time, and eventually was gaslit enough into believing again, which is a whole other story. Um,
Right.
but ultimately, after a few years, I was burnt out, and the boy that I had a crush on started dating someone. And so I didn't see the point of being there anymore.
Oh, okay. So it was part of your being there was there was a guy and and
Which
then
I can
that
only
was
admit to myself now, but like back then I was telling people, you know what, God told me that he doesn't need me here anymore. And so like you use God as like an
yeah.
out. He's like your wingman. He's like, yeah, she's got to go, like, sorry.
One of the benefits of the God not talking back is you get to say what he says.
Exactly. And that's how a lot of this abuse happens because
Mm,
we use God to dictate our behavior
yeah.
over other people. And so I left missions, and then that began, quite a few years of just like rebellion, just like anger and pain and blind behavior where I married the first guy that I had sex with. And no, I did not have sex with him or yes, I had sex with him before we got married. So those two pieces of paper I signed were completely null and void.
Yeah, yeah.
Breach of contract. Um,
Breach of contract with
and so we were
God.
married for 5 years, and I broke the covenant. Yeah, I did. I broke it. And so this marriage was not super healthy, and it was very distracting for some time. And
Was
I
he
just
Christian as well, or
no, he was from India, so his religion is Sikh. It's
right?
different version. It's semi-related to
Yeah,
Hinduism,
I
excuse
know.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was his religion. And so in that time, I'm developing an eating disorder. I
Oh,
am
right.
developing.
And you've exited at this point.
I left
You're no longer
missions.
Christian.
Well, I left missions, and I was Christian
Right.
for a couple of years. Even though I married a non-Christian, I still felt Christian. But over a few years, I eventually kind of segued out and was called, pretty soon I was progressive, then I was agnostic, then I was just atheist after like 5 years or so.
Okay.
But I was really, really hurting, really hurting. And so then that was probably about 2010 by the time I divorced that guy, and I was calling myself an atheist at this point. And that's when I married the dude that is currently the guy that I'm married to. And it was nice to be in a safe relationship, an emotionally safe, he wasn't gaslighting me. He wasn't telling me to do anything I didn't want to do, which had been my experience for so long with religion. And so these last, I've been with him for 10 years now. And so these 10 years have been chock full of growing goodness. A lot of people talk about the deconversion process as the most traumatic part. And yes, it was really traumatic. But as someone who's been out now for 10 plus years, I would have to say that the cleanup work afterwards is, for me, incredibly painful.
And what do you mean by cleanup?
Cleanup work means unpacking a lot of the messages that you receive that perhaps, you get to that point where you're like, okay, I don't believe in God anymore. And you move forward and you're like, yay, I'm the best. I overcame this thing. But then slowly you realize, oh shit, like a lot of these messages are still like embedded in the back of my brain, but they're not as overt. And so they're messages about misogyny. There are messages about sexuality, about identity, about race, about so many things. And I mean, and then if you've been told your entire life that you are wicked, just because you leave God, just because you don't believe in God anymore, you don't all of a sudden go, oh my God, I'm great.
I'm no longer a sinner. Woo-hoo.
Oh yeah, I'm wonderful. I'm the most impressive ape I've ever met. Like this is fantastic. Like that did not happen. And so these last 10 years have been what I call, what do I call it? Anthrobiological grounding. It is the process of a human being coming to terms with being a biological being.
Right. Okay.
So that's kind of what I've been going through in these last 10 years, and working on processing my trauma publicly, and telling my story, because it is my story and we have nothing to be ashamed of. And we have everything to live for, and there's so many people that we can help. So that's kind of my passion now these days, to continue to unpack as many narratives as possible, whether they were bestowed on me by religion, or whether they were bestowed on me by culture, or by my race, or my nation. I want to be as free of those narratives as possible, and to free others from the oppression that those narratives cause as well.
It's interesting because obviously you're obviously innately quite a self-aware person, and a lot of your conversation is very much about your own psychological processes through that whole journey, right from as a child to today. So it's really interesting for somebody in psychology to hear some, and I'm the same as well. I've always been that way as well, so I can really relate to a lot of what you've said, and your experiences are quite similar as well. So it's really interesting to sort of hear all of that. I mean, I don't want to be absolutist and say what's the greatest lesson you've learned, but do you want to talk about a specific lesson through your healing time, something that you've unpacked that you perhaps just today you're feeling really good about that, or it was just a big theme throughout that whole thing? Just you can pick whatever's shouts out to you.
I mean, I think the largest overarching thing that I get out of this, or that I find the most healing to all of this, is being in love with myself, which was nothing that I was able to achieve for a long time. And it gets a little muddy, right? Like, because there's a little bit of like wooey language going on about self-love. There's like
Yeah.
a lot of like good vibes only. You deserve it. You're worth it, baby. Blah blah blah. And like I've always been kind of turned off by that because,
Same.
right? Yeah, because I don't really buy into that rhetoric, that
Mhm.
particular like the grammar, the language that they're linguistically.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't need to be good enough there, because I've come to a realization, the way I see the world is that I don't need to be good enough for
Mhm.
anyone. I don't need to tell myself that I am worthy to be loved, that I deserve love. Like, I understand what people are saying when they say that. However, if for me, when I look at my story, which my story began with the Big Bang, and I'm just a little cog in this story. Like there is no overarching narrative of like needing to deserve love or being good enough. In fact, I am post qualification. I don't need to be seen as good enough or bad or whatever. I am just an incredibly complex and wonderful human being. You don't come across a whale and say that whale's a dick. Like, and if you
Yeah.
do, what the fuck is wrong with you? But like, we don't do this to other animals, is my point, because we recognize the complex beauty of creation, of the universe, of the lives that have been formed through this process of chaos and refinement. Like, I mean, look at me. I'm sitting here on a microphone, waving my hands and talking and communicating to you and coming to terms with something together. Is
Yeah.
that not impressive? Are you
Yeah.
not impressed? Like, we're amazing as we are. And so for me, I am over this. I'm over this good enough bullshit. Does it affect me every day? Yes, it does. Because my brain doesn't quite know that we're over it yet.
No, no,
The
no. I know
analytical
there's
part
also like
does.
a plant that's been put in unhealthy soil and has just grown its whole existence in this unhealthy soil, has only
Yes.
got that unhealthy soil too. So it's no surprise that years later, because as a child you were raised in this environment with, all these unhealthy ideas
Yeah.
of how of the kind of, I mean, I don't want to say Christian humility. The Christian concept of humility can be quite nice in the mainstream churches,
Yeah.
but in these evangelical groups and fundamentalist Christian groups, like the one I was raised in, and the ones you were raised in, they almost use that Christian concept of humility in this most abusive way that really is about saying you're not worthy.
Yeah.
You're not good enough, and nothing you ever do will be good enough, so that we can get you to keep committing to the
Yeah.
faith, to the organization,
Right.
and not
Which is
not
why I think
rise
it's
above.
right. And which is why I think it's beautiful as a secular humanist to just be like, I don't need to be either. I don't need
Yeah.
to like pat myself on the back and say, you're good enough, or say, oh, you suck because you're part of white supremacy. Like, yes to everything, but like in the middle, there's this space where like I am solid.
Mm-hmm.
I am alive, and therefore nothing. I'm alive, and so that's
Yeah.
it. And I don't need to be right. I don't need to not be wrong. I can go through life and have things pointed out to me about being wrong and grow through it, and never have to turn to myself and say, well, you suck. Like, I don't need to
You
suck.
don't have to evaluate it at the end. It don't have to
No.
be this was brilliant or that was awful, or this is yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, so it's like there's this Maya Angelou quote that says, um, do your best until you know better, then do
Mm-hmm.
better.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it. Like, I mean, even that language is just a little too loaded for me, but the point
Yeah.
is like, how do I want to qualify myself? I want to qualify myself as someone who is ready to be wrong every day, not in a way that's degrading to myself, but like that I am so incredibly proud of my ability to absorb new truth, even if it's counter to my identity. That's what makes me proud, my flexibility to take in new information and to change. my behavior and who I am and how I move in the world. Like, that's what makes me proud of who I am. Not that I'm good enough or that I earned this or that, or, you know,
Yeah.
so I think that's my biggest takeaway from my growth, and that I can trust myself, that I don't need to be afraid all the time. A lot of the people that I coach are really afraid of making choices.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really understandable because of how we grew up, that we had to defer to someone constantly,
Mm.
whether it was a spiritual silent person or whether it was a spiritual hierarchy overlord type person in a physical body that we had to constantly defer to, or whether it was our spouse.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, you know what? Like, I know I don't always make decisions that have positive impacts. Sometimes those decisions have negative impacts, and I wish that that wouldn't have happened. But in the end, what I think is important to me is knowing that I can clean it up. I
Yeah.
am invested in cleaning it up. If the decision doesn't go how I would have wanted it to go, I am invested in showing up, apologizing, repairing, restoring, owning my shit,
Yeah.
and still loving myself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's something that I've taken away, and that I see a lot of people still really struggling with, you know, feeling confident to make decisions that are scary, that they're afraid might go poorly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But letting them go poorly, if they go poorly, let them go poorly, and then deal with it, and knowing that you are competent to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's something quite empowering about what you just said there, like, and owning your shit, is that the fear that we have that stops us from owning our shit feels like we're going to lose our personal power or control in a situation, or we're just going to become really submissive as soon as we own up to our shit. But in fact, it's the other way around. As soon as
Yes.
you're able to own up to your shit, then you know that's where when you become empowered, because yeah, a strong person doesn't need to fear being truthful about who they are.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I wish that our politicians shared that value,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
that is the
that's something a
antithesis.
politician never can do until they lose their elected power. Yeah, as
Yeah.
soon as they come out of office, then you get interesting interview. I love watching interviews of world leaders, presidents, prime ministers once they've left office.
Yeah.
They're much more interesting.
Because they don't have to be right anymore. They don't have to
Oh.
give black and white answers, and like they can be honest about what the experience was like. Like Michelle Obama, like her documentary was really enlightening. I'm like, shit, I didn't even realize this was what she was going through for 8 years, and I hurt for her that this was such uh, a performance that had to be made, that she had to be perfect all the time, and even when she was perfect, the people were, you know, gonna still berate her. And
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah, she could never be honest about it in the moment, because then it would just add to fuel, you know,
yeah.
and that's completely unfair. But that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the ugly side of politics for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. If
Yeah.
I don't if I want to put pressure on you, but if you got any last thoughts you want to like want to give
Last
out, or
thoughts. I mean,
for a close.
the thing that I'm very much all about, and that I think extends into pretty much any conversation that we have, and that I'm the most passionate about, is the concept of autonomy, which
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, our ability to make decisions for ourselves regarding things that belong to us, which is, you know, the words that I say. I have autonomy over that. I have autonomy over my body, and we can get into a discussion about what I is and what my
Yeah,
body
yeah,
is, but that's fine. But point being, like, that is my new value. Having left religion, my new value of the world is that I have autonomy, and so does everyone else.
mm-hmm.
Because people that I talk to that come out of religion are very excited when I talk about having autonomy. They're like, yeah, because like that means fun things and good times. And but what is rarely discussed about on these platforms is then if you have autonomy, if you're so excited about the autonomy that you have as a human being that is bestowed to you because you're just alive, what does that mean for everyone else?
Mm.
Do they also get that same autonomy? And the answer should probably be yes. And so if everyone else is autonomous, what the hell's happening right now? Like, if you look around, do you see everyone else having this access to the same kind of autonomy that you have?
Right.
Do we all have access to the same kind of autonomy, or the autonomy that we should have? Are certain people having their autonomy stripped from them in a systematic way?
Mm-hmm.
Are they having it stripped from them because of their gender, because of their race? And so I'm drawn to celebrating my autonomy and my who I am, and loving who I am, and enjoying being in this body as a conscious human being. And at the same time, if I'm that excited about it, I want to empower us, get us on the streets to advocate and fight for, and make a priority to fight for, the autonomy of other people, whether it's locally, whether it's internationally, whether it's the autonomy of people who aren't born yet. And no, I'm not talking about abortion. I'm talking about future generations. What are we doing to the autonomy of future generations when we are destroying the planet? We are taking away the rights of people in the future to live in a way that is sustainable. And so I just like thinking about that a lot, and it guides a lot of my decisions. It's not always black and white. It shouldn't be black and white, but it definitely is my guiding light when I try to balance out my autonomy with the autonomy of the entire world, and that they all matter. Not all lives matter. That's not where I want to go with that, but like that.
No, I know what you mean.
Human
Yeah.
beings matter. Every one of us matters. And so if not all of us are experiencing the same kind of privilege,
Yeah.
then it should be a priority to fight for that, and to
Yeah.
not just skate through life enjoying what we have. And so that's I think my biggest passion, value wise.
I love that. I love that. And I think through working with apostate support for the years that I have, and working as a charity fundraiser for 10 years, what I've noticed with people that have experienced any kind of trauma, and especially religious trauma, like the kind of upbringings that we've had and what we've been talking about today, that real sense of healing definitely is a huge part of that. Comes from, I'm now going to use what I've learned and what I've got to help others.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest thing that you can then go on to do with your freedom.
Yeah.
And your autonomy is to help others to achieve their own freedom, or whatever who they are for themselves. So that's a really lovely message. Thank you for that. Okay, so thank you so much for spending time with us. So this is going to go on YouTube. So yeah.
Is it okay if I plug a couple of the stuff that I've got going on?
Sorry?
Is it okay if I plug a couple of things I've got going on?
Sure, yeah. If you want to mention you have a blog or a podcast, or
yes,
all of the above.
I've got a few things going on. So you'll hear me talk about deconversions and
Right.
on the podcast called Everyone's Autonomous. And so you can find that online on any podcast streaming thing that you have out there. And then I also do life coaching work for religious recovery, as well as people who are interested in ethical non-monogamy, which is another thing I started to explore through this idea of autonomy. And recovery from religion, to be honest, that purity culture we mentioned. And so you can find out about my coaching at mariedelefant.com. And then lastly, we didn't really talk about it, is the volunteer photography work I'm doing for social justice organizations here in Minneapolis.
Right.
People can follow that at Marquee, and that's MARKEI photo.com. And I think that's pretty much everything that
And
I
that's
do.
it. Wow, that's brilliant. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. I'm going to have to check out your photography then as well.
Cool.
So that's really cool. And if you're watching this and you are wanting to get in touch with like-minded people, this is an experience that you can relate to, or you're thinking of leaving a religion, or you've recently left a religion, or you left a million years ago and you'd like to be in touch with other people, then let us know. You can contact us. There are social groups. We usually hold physical events, but in the age of COVID, we're now having online events, online socials. So just message us on our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of them, Faith to Faithless, and or you can email us info@faithtofaithless.com. Okay. So thank you very much, Marie.
Thank you for having me, Terri.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.